Welcome to Wake Up and Live with Christopher Flagg. This is a daily podcast to encourage and inspire godly living. Let's join in and listen to today's message.
Good morning. Thank you so much for again tuning in today. I'm Christopher Flagg. Today we're continuing on where we left off yesterday, just talking about how to war against average. And, if you're going to live a life that God created you to live, if you're going to live a life full of potential, if you're going to live the kind of life that never settles, you have to come to a place where you decide to stop running and instead choose to take a stand. And I'm not talking about taking a stand on issues or dogmas or beliefs. Those things come and go and often circumstantial. Here's what it means to take a stand is far more profound and central to who you are. You have to eventually stop trying to be what everyone else wants you to be, and you have to stop choosing to become only what comes easy to you. You have to decide what will define you. What will mark you as a person? How will you be known by others? Your decisions are the direct results of truly knowing yourself. Frankly, I think most of us live our lives in fear. Who we become is less of the results of where we're going than it is by the consequences of what we are running from. It's unfortunate, but I completely resonate with this. I wish I didn't. I wish I could say that my life has never been defined by my fears. I wish I could say that my life has never been affected by what I was running from and that all my life was completely attributed to what I was running toward. But sadly, I'm like most people when it comes to fear. Courage is rare and precautious possession. It's just precious. The prophet Samuel, who lived in the time of King David, described the unique individual who came to David's side and created a fierce alliance with him. He went into more detail about three particular individuals. With each one, he told a story that serves as a resume for their leadership. The third man is named Shammah. Samuel described one brief moment when the Philistines banded together at a place where there was a field full of lentils and Israel troops fled from them in fear. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and he struck the Philistines down. And we are told, of course, that the Lord brought about a great victory. As I picture this incident in my mind, it's the imaginary like a scene straight out of the Gladiator with the cinematography and an ominous Philistine army gathers at the edge of the fields of lentils. The Israelites see them and are overwhelmed with fear. The Philistines are imposing both in stature and just in sheer numbers. These are the people of Goliath, right? They are great warriors by nature. They're ruthless and seemingly fearless. The Israelites, on the other hand, are clearly not ready for war. Just the sight of the Philistines caused them to abandon their posts and they run for their lives. Ironically, running in fear is not a solution to their problems. The Philistines are going to come to eventually where there will be war, which is a reminder for our own lives. When we run in fear, we're only postponing the inevitable. We will eventually have to face those fears. We will eventually have to fight those battles. Running only makes us weaker and makes our opposition stronger. But then there is Shammah, who stands between the two armies, one that came to fight and the other is running in fear. Maybe at first he finds himself running with his men. Maybe at first he thinks it's a strategic retreat and an attempt to reposition so they can engage the enemy with some advantage. But then there is a moment when Shammah realizes that for his army, the battle has already been lost. And I can only imagine the satisfaction that must have filled the Philistines when they realized that the battle was over before it even began. How strange it must be when suddenly they see one man stop and turn around. Maybe he does this only after pleading in vain with his men to take a stand. Maybe it is at this moment when he realizes that all his appeals to their honor and duty are to no avail. Maybe it's when he finds himself alone and that he finds his courage. And suddenly the Philistines see one man stop and turn around, and he stands alone against the army. He stops in the middle of the fields of lentils and he takes his stand. And perhaps at the first, Philistines simply send out one soldier, their champion, to face Shammah and to end his insolence, right? And then, to their shock and dismay, Shammah strikes him down, and perhaps they send 3, then 10, and eventually however many other men they have who has a thirst for blood. They rush to the field of lentils to win war against an army of one. Who can know in the mind of this one man? How can we call his actions anything but madness? How could a person who have such little value for his own life that he would choose a battle he could never win? No one would scorn him for running. After all, he would simply be joining the legion of cowards who together would weave a story of impossible odds justifying their cowardness. People like Shammah create a problem for the rest of us. One person who chooses to live this heroic life disrupts the narrative. We are living a lesser life, an acceptable option. Even if he had failed, even if he had died, the moment he took a stand, he changed the story. He changed the standard. It's hard to tell the story as you sit around the fireplace and explain that you had no option but to run. But some innocent child will ask, but where's Shammah? For Shammah, there was no point in running for your life if once you get there, you have no reason to live. And if his stubbornness doesn't make things bad enough, the outcome makes it worse. He not only survives, but he wins. He does it by himself, what armies of Israel did not believe that they could do together. God does through one man what he clearly longed to do through all of his people. If he had not run in fear, Shammah's story would have been their story. When Shammah returns to his people, battle-weary and covered in blood of his enemies, there is really nothing he needs to say. His presence, his very existence, is an indictment on the other men who fled. Don't expect to be popular if you choose to rise above the status quo. I have to wonder what it was the particular field of the lentils that just inspired Shammah to take a stand. Maybe it was just the intersection of two armies that brought him to that place, or maybe the field of lentils was a marker of the food and the resources his people would need to have to survive. There was no explanation for what that particular place. Maybe it's because that's not nearly as important as the point of it all. There comes a time and a place where you have to decide. This is worth fighting for. This is where I stand. This is who I am. This is the life I have chosen. I will not run. I will not allow fear to move me from where I should be and to where it wants me to live. I would rather die facing the challenge than exist running from it. The stark reality is that all of us choose a burial plot long before we're buried in the ground. All of us, whether consciously or unconsciously, find a piece of ground where we choose to take our stand. Yet the reality is that far too many of us, the place where we set our feet is rarely the results of a decisive decision to stop running and start fighting. What we must answer for ourselves if we decide to never settle is, where have we chosen to take our stand? What is the plot of ground that will define our story? I know one thing for certain about all of us. We are all standing somewhere. But how did we get there, and why are we there? Did we get there because we are running away from something or running to something? Do our feet mark where our fear has driven us or where our faith has taken us? To stand our ground will look different for each one of us. And so we have to recognize that as we begin to look at your journey. Where is the place that you are saying, this is where I am going to take my stand? Not a word of this really will matter if your choices don't matter. But if your choices have any effect on your future at all, then you need to stand your ground. You need to decide to stop running in fear and turn around and fight the good fight. You need to decide who you are and what you're about and why you live and what you're willing to die for. Until you decide to stand your ground, you will live your life like a leaf blown by the wind. You will see yourself as a victim of circumstances or even worse, as a God's cruelty. I mean, it's strange to me, but I know people who have already brought their plot of land in which they will be buried. When I have talked to them, this process is incredibly important to them. They carefully have selected the view and the people they would surround them. I mean, how strange that there are people in this world who have taken more care to decide where they will die than how they will live. You know, I knew a man whose uncle insisted that he be buried by a six-pack of beer in his casket. I mean, strange what people want in their coffin with them. You see, when I die, I want to make sure there are no arrows left to put by my dead body. I just want this empty quiver. And may you also die with this empty quiver. So today, when you look at this life and you look at seeing where are you standing today and where is God calling you to stand? Where do you need to start fighting? Where do you need to a place in your heart that allow the fear and stop running away from these things, but take the opportunity to say, this is where God has called me to stand. Because if you're going to reach that future, if you're going to war against the average in your life, if you're going to reach your full potential, at some point, someplace, you're going to need to take a stand. So thank you again for tuning in and listening today. And I hope that you wake up and live empowered, blessed, and loved, that you would begin to realize inside your heart, you need to stop running and take a stand. God bless. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you for tuning in today for Wake Up and Live. Join us each day for a new inspiring message. Also check out our Saturday morning's Word and Worship for 30 minutes of getting refueled, plus our Sunday sermon series on the seasons of life.